Hey everyone, this is my con guide for patch 4.6 in our favorite game, Paladins Champions of the Realm. Here's my short self-introduction. My username is WalnutYellow and I mostly play supports and tanks. I'm currently in Diamond and I have more than 60 levels on con just from mostly ranked games. Con's pretty much carried me to where I am now, and I'm making this guide so that others can start abusing this champion like I did. So there's a lot of talk about Con being a very easy off tank to play. People say, oh, Con's OP, Con's stupid, you just shoot things and ult things. This is true, but there's also a lot more to using Con effectively. This guide's mainly made for players looking to climb out of plat and gold, but I'm hoping that you can kind of learn something no matter what level you play at. This is what I'll be covering in this video. We'll go over what Con is, his abilities and talents, and how Con should be played. Then I'll go over his cards, items, and matchups, and I'll finish with some common mistakes that I see a lot of newer Con players making. If you're impatient, you can skip around with the timestamps in the description. So who is Con? Before we answer this question, we need to talk a bit about off tanks. If you know what an off tank is, feel free to just skip to the timestamp on the screen. I'll just be giving a very quick crash course on off tanking. Okay, let's start. So the frontline role in Paladins actually contains two roles. The first is the point tank. These tanks are designed to contest the objective and to stay on the objective for as long as possible while their team does their thing away from the objective. There are only 4 point tanks in the game, and there are 2 that are a lot better than the other 2. The second role is the off tank. There are a lot of off tanks in the game, mostly because Hi-Rez doesn't know how to make new and unique point tanks. Just look at Yagoroth. The off-tank job description is probably the least intuitive out of all of the roles in Paladins because you're a frontline, but you don't have to play on the point, and where you play pretty much changes game to game, though there's some standard guidelines you can follow. Basically, the off-tank exists to enable their team by making space, applying pressure, and peeling. In a standard 2-2-1 team, you'd send your point tank to the point to do point tank things, and then you'd send your off tank to the off lane. This off lane is usually the high ground beside the point, and the off tank wants to take this high ground to give their point tank an easier time of surviving, since at the end of the day, the goal of the game is to capture the objective. If you want an analogy, off tanks are basically the big muscular bouncers that keep their team safe. You make space so that the rest of the team can do their thing. That is the core of the off tank role. Here's an example. Let's just imagine everyone's favorite map, Bazaar. I'm kidding, everyone hates Bazaar, it sucks. But this is one of the maps where off tanks are very, very important because your DPS and your supports will want to play on the catwalks around point, like upstairs. And if you don't have an off tank on the high ground with you, the enemy off tank can just hold W to run at you and you can do absolutely nothing. You will be forced out of the fight. Your support can't heal anything. Your DPS can't damage anything, and your point tank just dies on the point without support. Yeah, so there's a really quick and shitty off-tank job description. If you want to learn more about off-tanking in general, there's some really, really detailed Reddit posts linked in the description, so go check this out if you're interested. So when would you actually want to pick Con? It's pretty simple. Con is never really a bad pick. He's got very high damage for a frontline champion, and I like to think of him as some kind of Swiss Army knife of the off-tanks because he's got a little bit of everything. There may be some better situational picks, such as a Raum or a Yagoroth or a Ruckus, but Con will never be a bad pick. He'll always be better than Torvald because Torvald sucks, like a lot. You can pick Con early in drafts because you can't really counter Con unless you try something weird like triple DPS, which we'll talk about later. He's pretty self-sufficient and he doesn't need a lot of healing like other off-tanks such as Makoa. Makoa is very high maintenance. Con's ult is an execute ult if you use it correctly, and he wins every off-tank matchup in the game, except for maybe Atlas. Con's abilities are super simple. His gun goes pew pew, it does around 700 DPS and around 1000 with all headshots. He has a talent that lets him shoot faster with a little less damage per shot, and this gives him around 900 DPS and it can be as high as around 1350 with headshots. Spoiler alert, you'll be using this talent all of the time. Con's second ability is a shield that blocks damage coming from the front. It's a short shield, so it barely covers your head and toes. It uses a resource that recharges when not in use, kind of like the new Aegis Nando shield or Io's heal. It's not as big as Nando's shield, so you can't shield teammates with it, and it's mainly just for yourself. People above or below you can shoot around the shield, and explosions can damage you around your shield, so blasters like Willow, Drogos, BK, they can detonate their explosions behind you and you'll take damage. If your shield is completely broken, it takes about 8 seconds to fully recharge, and you'll be locked out of using it until it is back to half health. Khan's battle shout is his main source of sustain. You hit the button and become damage immune for 1.2 seconds and heal yourself and everyone around you for 1100 HP, even through walls. This healing is affected by cauterize. So you're damage immune, but you're not CC immune, meaning that you can still get hooked by Makoa, or knocked back, or turn into a chicken. You're also locked out of any other abilities during that animation, though you can still move around and jump around. Khan's commander grab is a forward dash that stuns whoever you hit and throws them behind you. You're immune to knockback while dashing. You can also use this for mobility, especially off high ground since the momentum carries. For example, on Splitstone or in Timbermill, you can dash straight from high ground onto the point. His grab cancels channeled abilities or abilities with windups, such as Nando's shield, Ash's dash, Torvald's ult, or Imani's firebeam. If you use it smartly, you can also throw enemies off of the map. Like the shout, you're locked out of doing anything during the animation. This ability counts as CC, crowd control, so abilities that have CC immunity abilities like Inara with Mother's Grace or Makoa ulting won't be affected by this at all, and you'll just dash right through them. You can grab Yagharoth and stun her, but you can't throw her behind you because Yagharoth is stupid. Speaking of stupid, we have Khan ult, one of the best ults in the game. You point your crosshair at the enemy, hit the button, and they get pulled to you. You can hold them up for your team to shoot them, or you can throw them off the map. This counts as crowd control, so some champions can dodge this, like with this grab. Yagharoth gets stunned by your ult, but that's it, because Yagharoth. You get a 30% refund if you miss the ult, or if the target dies before they arrive in your hand. There's a short half-second delay between when you press the button and when the ability actually activates, so keep this in mind if you're trying to ult someone about to get behind cover. The rage on this ult is actually insane, and usually isn't something you need to consider. Like, you can just ult people from halfway across the map and you'll probably be in range. Commander's grab used to be very strong, but then they nerfed it and now the talent is dead. With the Riesel buffs and how much CC is already in the game, usually just like your other teammates have CC, this talent's going to be basically useless after the first round, after people get Riesel 1 or 2. Leon's shield is super niche. It's not as bad as people say it is, and you can run it if you're in a double off-tank comp, or if you're solo tanking as Khan for some reason. I don't think it's ever worth it, and I'd rather run the third talent. The third talent is Storm of Bullets. It increases your rate of fire, but you do slightly less damage per bullet. Overall, this brings your DPS from around 700 to 900. You do more damage, you build more ult charge, you get more kills, and you win more fights. This is the good talent, and you'll be using this every single game. I was going to go over his cards here, but I thought it would make more sense to talk about how Khan should be played first so that we know what to build into later. Khan is different from other off-tanks because he doesn't make space for free, and this is why I think he's actually a lot harder than people say he is. Other off-tanks like Ashe, Half-Shell Makoa, or Atlas can just put their shield up, go AFK, and their team can still get some value out of the shield. Obviously, they won't actually go AFK, but the point is that they can just get value by putting down their shield, and they can shoot for free. Khan can't do this. Khan's shield is very selfish. It's very small, you can't protect anyone except yourself. So if enemies see Khan shielding, they'll just shoot the squishies behind him. This means that Khan is pretty much useless and out of the fight whenever he's shielding, and to get value out of Khan, you need to be aggressive. So if Khan can't shield his DPS, then how does he get value? He basically has 3 things going for him: his damage, his off-tank matchups, and his ult. At the beginning of each round, Khan wants to just take control of the offlane fast. You want to push aggressively and hold down forward and your trigger for as long as you possibly can and just overwhelm the enemy off-tank. Ideally, you'd have your flank or damage and support behind you, and you want to get a pick as soon as possible. This is because once your enemy starts getting set up with their shield and stuff, you will start losing because Khan can't shield his team. You can disrupt the enemy off-tank's abilities and set up the kill for your team, then push into the enemy space to take pressure off of your point tank. It's a lot easier with your ult, since you can basically just guarantee a 5v4 by ulting someone before the fight even starts. You want to be careful though, because the enemy team can just rush you while you're ulting, and it's not worth it to trade 1-for-1 with your ult. If you're playing against an aggressive team, you want to prevent the enemy dive from getting into your backline. Remember that off tanks enable their team by making space, applying pressure, and peeling. This is the peeling. Khan doesn't really do well against multiple enemies, so you want to get your DPS to come with you, but if they leave you, you want to just fall back to your support. Using your ult to deny an enemy dive before it even happens is always a good option. Khan's ult is very strong, but it can also be very hard to land once you're at a level where people are actively aware that you have your ult and do their best to juke or shield it. It doesn't really matter who you ult, as long as you get a kill with it, that's enough value. I'm going to talk about some of his cards now, starting with Plate Mail. Plate Mail gives you an additional 150 HP per level, and I think this is Khan's best card by far, because since Khan doesn't have a shield, he gets the most value when he's able to just hold down his fire button and kill the enemy before he gets killed. So having 750 HP extra with Plate Mail 5 just allows you to hold down your trigger for that much longer and helps you win so many more fights. His ammo card, Excessive Course, I think this is necessary for Storm of Bullets since you burn through your ammo so much faster. I usually run it at a 3, but some people run it at 4 or 5. Hope Guard increases your healing received by 6% per level while your shield is active. This is basically free rejuve. I think this is really underrated, and I run it at 5 in some of my builds because when you're shielding, you're useless, so you want to decrease your shield uptime. So having faster healing while you're shielding means that you can heal faster and go back to shooting. I think Bloodthirst is a pretty niche card. I usually would not run this unless I'm against a Rom or a Yagharoth. It's 4% lifesteal per level. It gets canceled pretty hard by Cot, but it helps. Like every bit of sustain helps in your fight. I wouldn't really run this in a standard deck though. It would just be like a niche deck. Another card that's pretty popular is Never Surrender, which reduces the cooldown of your battle shout by 0.6 seconds per level. I think this is extremely overrated. It's like Makoa's Strong Arm card that reduces his cooldown of Hook. It's a very strong ability, but you really only need to use it once per fight. And if you haven't gotten like a pick or a value out of it once in a fight, then you usually can just be doing something better. I think building into health, damage, and just healing faster is more value. And I think his shield cards otherwise are pretty bad because like increased rate of charge for your shield, increased health of your shield, and healing during your shield is just very slow, and you only get value out of it if you're like running away or shielding and trying to get around a corner, and that's just not very good in my opinion. Some of his cards are good fillers, like the generating ammo after battle shout and ammo after grab, though I usually don't have space for that. And I think that his commander's grabs cards are also pretty bad because you usually don't want to be using commander's grab in like a huge team fight, because when you're grabbing, you're locked out of everything and you're just going to be taking a ton of damage while you're just holding the guy in the air. So the damage reduction and like the healing during grab, it's like you're hardly going to get like full value out of that. Hold the Line is very popular with some like newer con players, which is healing for an additional 80 after activating battle shout per level. I think it's terrible because at most you're healing 400 extra health when you could just run more plate mail and have 400 extra health and just not have to shout for it. Yeah, it's like I never get people who run hold the line. It's not a good card. Into the Breach is a very interesting card. Increase your movement speed by 8% per level for 3 seconds after shouting. It allows you to go really, really aggro. I have a deck called Ape Shit Aggro for this card. I have it at 5. I just shoot, shout, and then just zoom into the backline and get a pick. It's good if you have a really aggressive flank, like a Zin or a Vatu, because you can follow them. But it's also not really a standard deck. So here's my build. I have Hope Guard 5, Plate Mail 5, Excessive Force 3, and then 2 of my like favorite fillers. This is like the deck I use all the time. And then for my Lifesteal deck, I have Bloodthirst 5 instead of Hope Guard. for just dueling some of the non-shieldy off tanks. I rarely use this, but I just pull it out once in a while if I'm against like Yago and Rom. Usually I just find more value in Hope Guard. Here's my kind of intro to Con deck that I made. This is what I used before kind of building more into just an aggressive playstyle. You can't really go wrong with this build. It's not the best, but it's good for learning Con because you have a bit more forgiveness with your shout usage. You have ammo, you have health, you have a little bit of Hope Guard. You can't really go wrong with it. So if you're new to Con, I would recommend stealing this deck from me and then moving to my default deck once you're more comfortable with the champion and cycling his cooldowns. For items, I think Cauterize is a must. You need to get Cauterize up and running before anything else. You can also get Resilience if the team has a lot of CC, and Morale Boost if you're hitting a lot of ults or if you want to ult multiple times for mid-fight. I like Master Riding. I think it's underrated. It allows you to get back into the fight faster, and you can also do some really sneaky stuff and then just basically start the fight in the enemy backline. It throws them off, and I like it a lot. Here's a clip of me using Master Riding 3 and basically making a really good play. For matchups, Khan pretty much beats all the other off tanks in 1v1s, but he is really weak against DPS or especially blasters because he just kind of gets shredded. He doesn't have a really good shield and they do more damage than him. So actually a common counter to Khan is to run triple DPS because then you're denying him an off tank to bully and you're just damaging him before you can get close enough to do anything, and you can focus fire him when he ults someone. For specific off tank matchups, the fight against Atlas is pretty much skill based. It's whoever uses cooldowns first. If you're fighting near an environmental hazard, you can threaten to throw him off a cliff, and that kind of gives you an advantage, but Khan versus Atlas is probably like the most skill based matchup in this list. Makoa, you can kind of just bully Makoa. He has a big head, you can headshot. You can disrupt his shield if he's not using half shell with your grab. And you just basically out damage him in every way. But you have to be careful because if you're low and you're shielding, he can wall jump and hook you over his shield. If you shout and he has his hook up, he can hook you during his shout because you're not CC immune. Ashe pretty much just loses every 1v1 she has against you because you do more damage, you can grab her out of her dash and you just walk through her shield. But Ashe is really good at winning 2v2s because her shield is good and she has decent CC. So with a 2v2 with Ashe, you just want to focus on either Ashe or the squishy with your DPS and just kill one of them fast before they manage to chip you down. Ruckus is kind of a weird matchup because you can't really chase him down. You can ult him, but that's only if you have your ult up. Otherwise, he can just kind of dash away. He can just spam his dash and just jump and shoot you from above your shield. I'd say it's a stalemate. It kind of just depends on who's getting more help from the team. Raum is usually a free kill, or like you can just kind of stop him from doing whatever he wants to do because you can grab him out of his dash, you can ult him, and he's basically free ult charge for you. The only thing he can do against you is to counter ult you because he's CC immune during his ult animation, so just be careful of that. Yogg is stupid. You can farm damage on her, but she doesn't give you that much ult charge because she has DR. You can't ult her, but you can grab her during her acceleration just to stop her from like running away. It's okay, I guess. Torv just dies. Torvald's bad. For point tanks, you don't really want to be fighting point tanks, but if you have to, you want to split them because Fernando, Terminus, and like I guess Inara, they can kind of deny damage from one direction, but if you start shooting at them from an off angle while your team shoots at them from your backline, then they have to kind of decide which source of damage they want to block off, and then you do damage to them. So basically you want to split tanks like Term and Nando. Barrick kind of beats you if you're trying to take his space, but at the same time he can't really like push into your backline as well, so you guys shouldn't really be meeting as much. Inara just gets kind of burned because she doesn't have much shielding. Her wall blocks her off from you as well as you from her, but she kind of stays alive for a while, so you just want to just slowly chip her away. Now to wrap this up, I'm going to go over some common mistakes that I'm seeing from a lot of players. in like gold and plat. First one is shielding too much. A lot of players just have an instinctual habit to just start shielding the second they start taking damage. I see a lot of cons shielding when they're at like 75% health. And like we said earlier, once you start shielding, you're out of the fight, you're not doing anything, and then your team's just getting shot at for free. So it takes a bit of like discipline and just, I guess, balls to just hold down the trigger with con. And the loadout helps because it gives you extra health and extra ammo, so you can just hold it down for longer. I see a lot of beginner cons thinking they're doing a lot, but at the end of the day, they're just like holding down shield, and they get more shielding than damage. They have the lowest damage on their team outside of the support. They don't have any kills because they're just kind of staying alive, but they're not really doing anything. Another mistake I see is dashing at a group of enemies, or dashing where you're exposed to fire, because when you're dashing, you're taking a lot of damage because you're exposed in the animation. You usually want dash to be used in 1v1s or to confirm kills or disrupt abilities. You don't ever want to open a fight with a dash because then you're just eating damage. I see people shouting too early in fights. Like they take like 500 damage and they shout, or they're full health, but like their ally is behind cover and waiting to heal, and then they just shout to heal them, and then they don't have their shout to actually use in the middle of a fight. Another thing with shout is that a lot of people don't cleanse caught. Basically, cauterize lasts for 1.5 seconds, and if you just hold your shield up for 1.5 seconds before shouting, you can usually get the full 1100 HP heal instead of just like a fraction of that. That's not always applicable because sometimes you're just shouting to negate like term ult or BK ult or something big, but whenever you can, you want to be cleansing caught just to get that extra bit of HP back. With ults, I see a lot of players ulting in very exposed places or ulting in places where they can't really follow up with the ult. Bad places, like they're just exposed when they're ulting because then they're standing in the middle of enemy fire. Usually you want to be able to just dodge behind cover with the ult. Also, I see a lot of players like ulting alone. So they're just holding the enemy and they're just hoping that someone on the other side of the map, like their team, can just shoot over, which doesn't really happen. You want to ult when you're sure that someone will follow up and do damage, or if you're next to an environmental hazard. You can throw someone into the well in Ascension Peak. That's a fun one. You can throw them into the blades on Splitstone. You can throw them anywhere on Frog Isle, they'll die. You want to be making sure that they don't have mobility. So like Ruckus can get back if you throw him off into a cliff. Rom can dash back if he has Rezel. Just make sure you can confirm the ult. The last thing with ults is that a lot of players telegraph them. They spend like 10 seconds just kind of standing on one side looking for an ult. And by then it's so obvious that you're going to ult, that the enemy's got their shields up, their CC immunity up. Your best bet is to just do it. That's kind of like lame advice, but if you just kind of do it whenever, then the enemy's less prepared. Like you can start shooting a little bit and then just ult like once the fight starts breaking out, if you're safe. But you just don't want to telegraph it because then it's very, very easy to predict it. And yeah, that's pretty much the con guide. I hope I've answered any questions you guys have had. If you have more questions or more specific questions, feel free to leave them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. If you want any con games reviewed, I'd be happy to do that. Just give me some time. Just like send me a comment, I guess, with like your match ID or recording. But yeah, you can see all my builds from my username, WalnutYellow, and I hope you learned something. Thanks for watching.